The year is 1968. In the fabled lands of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, there lived a man named Ernest Gary Gygax. He was a man who, above all things, treasured the creation and playing of war games. Yes, war games. Realistic simulations of historical battles played in a chess-like fashion. Gygax was a lover of these games, so much so that he was a founding member of the Lake Geneva Tactical Studies Association and also the founder of the Lake Geneva War Games Convention. At this first Gen Con, Gygax met a figure named Henry Bodenstedt. Bodenstedt had developed a war game of his own in the year prior, a game called Siege of Bodenburg. Being set in medieval times rather than a more modern battlefield, it was a new genre of war game that intrigued and inspired Gygax. Together with his friend Jeff Perrin, who himself made his own wargame rule set based on Siege of Bodenburg, the two made a new medieval wargame rule set called Chainmail. However, explains Ben Riggs of Nerdist, at the end of the game, there was a 14-page supplement describing the application of the rules to fantasy. The fantasy supplement provided rules for magic swords, monsters, and spells, with names like Lightning and Fireball. Enter Dave Arneson, a man inspired by the fantasy rules at the back of the Chainmail booklet. Based on what Gygax put forth, and inspired by Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Arneson wrote his own rules for a fantasy game called Blackmoor. The difference between Blackmoor and your standard wargame is that in Blackmoor, a player only plays one character at a time, and that character persists between sessions as they go out on an adventure in a party. This change was also inspired by a game called Braunstein, developed by David Wesley in 1969. According to Ben Robbins of Ars Ludi, David Wesley took his usual wargaming group and tried something a little different. Instead of having them command armies, he set down the two opposing leaders in a Prussian town before the battle, their troops nearby but not on stage. To give the other players something to do, he let them control other people around town. The mayor, a school chancellor, some revolutionary students, etc. The humble town was the eponymous Braunstein, Brownstone in German. In late 1972, Arneson drove down to Lake Geneva from his hometown in Minneapolis to show off and playtest Blackmoor with Gygax. To nobody's surprise, Gygax was captivated and asked to have a copy for himself. After a few weeks, he was mailed 18 handwritten pages of rules. After working tirelessly to expand the rules to 50 pages, he created the Castle Greyhawk campaign to play with his son and daughter, Ernie and Elise. This expanded Blackmoor rule set came to be named by Gygax as Dungeons and Dragons. However, since Gygax could not find a publisher for his new system, he had to create his own. Together with his friend and fellow Lake Geneva Tactical Studies Association member Donald Kay, he created his own publishing company, Tactical Studies Rules, or TSR for short. Arneson wasn't interested in the business aspect of the game, so he agreed to take royalties of sales and slowly fade out of the narrative. Gygax and Kay each contributed $1,000 to the project, but that was still not enough. The pair's search for greater funding led them to one Brian Bloom, who invested another $2,000 in exchange for becoming an equal partner in the company. Unfortunately, Kay would never see the fruits of his labor come to pass, as he passed away from a heart attack 2 years after the founding of TSR, with all his shares and company position going to his wife. After Kay died, his wife did not keep his shares for very long. Neither having the money to buy the shares back, Bloom convinced Gygax to allow his father, Melvin Bloom, to purchase Kay's shares. Now, with adequate funding for production, many units were sold by TSR. Their initial units sold like mad. As stated once again by Riggs, D&D sold 150 copies in its first month, and by summer, TSR ordered another 1,000 copies. However, rules clarifications contained in pricey supplements made playing a consistent version of the game difficult, and a lack of high-speed internet made announcements about new clarifications difficult and led to new releases not being very well promoted. This led to the game feeling rather bloated and complicated, so a decision had to be made. Gygax, brilliant as he was, decided to condense and innovate upon many of his rules, leading to the 1977 release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, a separate edition of the game that was not meant to be cross-compatible with the initial version. The two were released alongside each other, both serving a different purpose within the greater sphere of understanding. This led to a tarnishing in the relationship between Arneson and Gygax. Arneson was set to receive royalties from all sales of the initial release of Dungeons & Dragons. However, TSR deemed AD&D a creatively distinct enough entity from this other version that it didn't merit Arneson getting any royalties. According to David Chapman of YouTube channel Davy Chappy, this spawned a huge legal debate that ended in Dave getting 2.5% of the revenue from AD&D, which was a good amount of money, sure, but the rift between Ernest and Dave never healed. For the next several years, everything was going smoothly for TSR. That is, until 1985. During the time of goodness and wealth, TSR split into 4 corporate entities: TSR Incorporated, TSR International, TSR Ventures, and TSR Entertainment, the latter of which Gygax left for Hollywood to found. Early before the split, Melvin transferred his shares to his other son, Kevin Bloom. Together, the Bloom brothers owned more of the company combined than Gygax did by himself, while Gygax, founder and head of TSR Entertainment, worked tirelessly to create a movie and a TV show with the D&D intellectual property. The Bloom brothers were flushing company money down the drain by overstaffing, buying far too many company cars, and deciding to unearth the underwater ruins of a 19th century shipwreck for some reason. Because of this overspending, Gygax was forced to halt production of the D&D movie when he found that the brothers had put TSR $1.5 million in debt with their ridiculous spending practices, and had decided to try and sell the company. Reasonably, Gygax responded by firing them. In an act of spiteful retribution, the Bloom brothers merged all of their shares together and shunted them onto the worst person they could possibly give it to. At the time, TSR general manager Lorraine Williams. She was a devout Christian in the time of the Satanic Panic, itself a story for another time, and absolutely hated the players of tabletop games. Why she was a general manager at the world's largest tabletop gaming company is anyone's guess, but she was now the most powerful person in that company. Seeing that everything was falling apart, Gygax made attempts to get his shares back from Lorraine. He was unsuccessful in court, and so sailed away for greener pastures and to make more games elsewhere. Now that none of the original founders were connected to TSR or Dungeons & Dragons, the game entered a new, terrible era. The era of Lorraine Williams, and the eventual release of the second edition. But that, my friends, is another talk for another time.